Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing. It's precision crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go, 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 go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 189 of Chalk Talk. I am your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. I got it right that time. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. We've had to put up with Dives and Ryan, on Armchair Scouts all these weeks. It's good to get back to just the two of us, without, them weighing us down.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the show will really take off. We were getting kind of tired of having to drag our team to the playoffs. I feel like Patrick Mahomes out here, man.
I'm just joking. We love Dives and Ryan. I had the kid.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is nice to get back to full NFL stuff. And you guys that have followed the show for a while, we used to do our draft stuff under the umbrella of Chalk Talk, and then we kind of split it off as a different show. So that's why Chalk Talk took the hiatus. We're back now. We're going to spend the next 2 weeks breaking down draft grades, and then we're going to put the draft in the rearview mirror, and we're going to get into all of the normal offseason content we do, expansion drafts, QB rankings, all of that sort of stuff. It'll be a lot of fun. If you guys have show ideas, feel free to hit us up. But today, we are going to dive into NFC draft grades. We'll be back next week to cover the AFC, and then we'll get fully past the draft into off-season content. So today, we're going to go through every NFC team's draft. We're going to talk their best value pick, their worst value pick, biggest draft regret, and then we will assign our overall grades. And so we're going to start off, as we normally do, with the NFC East, specifically with the Philadelphia Eagles here. And they, in the first round, took linebacker Jahad Campbell, Andrew Makuba in the second round, Ty Robinson, Mac McWilliams, Smile Munden Jr., and a plethora of other day 3 picks that I won't read all of those off. And so They had 3 top 100 selections. Although they only had 2 top 100 picks because they traded out. So 2 top 100 picks. They got, 3 top 100 players for me, 4 top 100 players for Mark.
No, opposite. It was 4 for you, 2 for me, actually. I think you're looking at the Dallas.
I am. Yep. Okay. Yeah. We're off to a great start here. I'm looking at the wrong chart. Yep. So they got 2 for you, 4 for me. So I'll go first with my best value pick. My best value pick was offensive tackle Cameron Williams. He was the number 77 player on my big board. They got him all the way down at 207. I really liked him as a player, as a developmental right tackle, potentially a guy that you would kick inside, but I'm not sure what the Eagles will do with him. So I thought that was a great value. I didn't really assign a worse value for them. They didn't really have a pick that was bad relative to where I had a player positioned. Like Makuba, I think I had at 60 and they took him at 64. Campbell, I had at 18 and they took him at 31. And then we're outside the top 100. And I'm hesitant to assign bad values outside the top 100. So I didn't give them a worse value. And they're not the only team I did that for. So don't come at me with your homerisms. And then I said my biggest draft regret was trading back. I think trading back got the Eagles multiple times. They missed on Charles Grant in the 3rd round. They missed on Jalen Travis, who's a guy I think they would have liked. And both times they immediately traded back again. And so I thought there were some missed opportunities with trading down. And I questioned the need to draft 3 offensive linemen on day 3 and walk out of the draft without a running back. So I felt like a day 3 running back could have made this roster. There's no way 3 offensive linemen are making the roster. So ultimately minor quibbles. I gave the Eagles a B+ overall. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, so I'm a little lower on the draft than I think the consensus Eagles fan or prognosticator is. And, 2 things I want to get off the top before we get into the rest of it. A, for the worst value, I have the same thing. Even though it's only a C+, it's an NA for me. I didn't give a worst value. And I think we feel the same way. You said the top 100. I'm not going to ever say someone had the worst value in a pick that's after the first 3 rounds. On day 3, I don't really think there is a worst value. So for me, it just comes down to, in the past couple of years, the Eagles, outside of those top 100 picks, have found a way to get a lot of those top 100 guys that I've had ranked high who have slipped down the board. This year, they didn't get any of those guys who were on my top 100 who slipped down the board. And that doesn't mean that I hate every player they drafted on day 3. I think you do more research after day 3 guys go. Ty Robinson seems to be interesting. Munden, I know, was a guy that you liked. Cameron Williams was a guy that I know a lot of people liked. And I was a little lower on Cameron Williams, but 207, I thought he was going to go in like the 3rd round. Antoine Powell-Ryland had a lot of sack production. So I totally get a lot of the swings they took on day 3, just none that, drove me crazy and none that, were huge steals for me. The best value on the board for me was actually Andrew Makuba, who I had 60th and they took 64th. Now, part of what I'm factoring into that is that I think it was maybe our biggest position of need coming into the draft. So to walk away with Makuba, who besides Watts, I think was the last player left on the board who you could feel good about starting at safety right away. So I feel, and maybe he won't start at safety right away, who knows, but I feel really good about that Makuba pick. I had Jihad Campbell 33 overall and they took him 31. So it's kind of like right where I had him ranked about. So I gave the slight nod to Makuba being my favorite value of the draft. I agree with you. My least favorite thing about the draft was trading out of the 3rd. It felt like, especially this year, I mean, you took how many picks on day 3? We ended up with 8 picks on day 3 here. That we could have used a pick on, in round 3 there. Deone Walker's still on the board. You had a couple of linemen you liked on the board. I think Wyatt Milam went like 2 picks before that they would have been on the clock. So there's a lot of names I would have rather seen, at the end of that 3rd round than trading back for yet, even more day 3 picks. But that's a pretty minor problem.
Yeah, we've got a comment coming in here from Yakko Warner asked, given how the draft unfolded, who would you have picked if the Eagles didn't trade back each time? I would have to go back and look because I don't remember what all the original pick numbers were. But Charles really, Grant would have been my guy in the 3rd round for sure. And I would have been totally fine if they took Xavier Watts too, take 2 safeties. That would have been fine with me. But I would have to go back and look and see what all those original pick numbers were.
Stutzman, I know you took Campbell, but they're talking like he might be an edge anyway. I mean, I think he's a linebacker, but you could have taken Stutzman as well. There was definitely some more names out there. Besides Watts, Mukuba was the pick I would have made there at 64. So I do think they needed to get a safety. There weren't that many in this draft. There was probably only 4 that I felt good about starting next year. And Starks was long gone. Eman Worry was long gone. And I would have preferred Watts, but Mukuba's got a lot of similarities to Watts. 5 picks last year, did it in the SEC. He's a little undersized, but I think Mukuba's a dog. He's a guy who you turn the film on and you like even more every time.
Yeah. All right. So let's keep rolling. Let's go to the Dallas draft. And Dallas in the first round takes Tyler Booker at pick 12, Donovan Ezeraku in the second round, Siobhan Revel Jr. in the third round, and then a plethora of day 3 picks. Again, I'm not going to read all the day 3 picks out, but they had 3 top 100 picks. They got 3 top 100 players for me, 4 of them for Mark. My best value, and I don't think, because I've got a sheet here where we put our stuff in. We're the same. We both have the same best value, both have the same worst value. So it's Siobhan Revel Jr. At pick 76. He was 55 on my big board. He was 52 on your big board. And then we both have the worst value being Tyler Booker, who was 41 and 42 for us respectively, and they took him at 12. And that on the Booker thing, like, I just think this is the second time in 4 years they've taken an interior offensive lineman in the first round. And although I would have been fine with the Eagles taking a guy like Tate Ratledge if the board had fallen a certain way and they couldn't trade out at 32, taking an interior guy at 32 is vastly different than taking one at 12, especially one with such athletic concerns as Tyler Booker. And so, I mean, to me, I'm not taking an interior offensive lineman in the top 15 unless it's a Quentin Nelson level prospect. It's just a clean prospect, perennial all-pro, as long as he doesn't get hurt. There's an argument. You can take a guy like that. I got no problem with the Colts taking a Quentin Nelson top 5. I've got major problems with the Cowboys taking a Tyler Booker at pick 12. So I thought that was a big miss for them. And then, and I think this ties into it, my biggest draft regret for them is leaving the draft with 2 running backs and 0 wide receivers. And I have to wonder if they had Ted McMillan so penciled in as their pick and then he wasn't there and they kind of panic selected Tyler Booker. So overall, I gave it a B- because I do like their second and third round picks a lot, especially at the places that they took them. But that first round pick really knocks it down for me. I couldn't justify anything higher than like a B+.
Allegedly, they had a lot of deals working out when Loveland was on the board and when Loveland got picked 10th, which is crazy, before Warren, which we disagree with. And I think most people disagree with. Those calls apparently stopped. Those people weren't calling up for Warren the way they were calling up for Loveland. So some people think they had a deal worked out with the Chargers. Some people think they had a deal worked out with Houston. And there was even some rumors that Houston tried to trade up for Booker after Loveland went off the board, which is crazy to me, that not only did Booker go 12, but there's potential that the other team in Texas was trying to trade up to get Booker at 12. It's so weird. But that's a classic. You should have traded down spot, or you should have traded up to make sure you got Genty or Tet. I think if you're Dallas, you had to walk out of this draft with a difference maker at playmaker. And I know that it's in vogue to kill Dak and, make fun of Dak. I think a lot more of whatever you want to say the regression from Dak last year in the limited time we did see him was, or whatever you want to say, he has one weapon on that offense. He has CeeDee Lamb. He had nothing in the running game. And even if you want to say, Rico Dowdle's pretty good. Well, now he's in Carolina. And you don't have a second receiver at all. Jake Ferguson's very average at tight end. The O-line's not elite anymore. And I understand that you're trying to address that with Tyler Booker, but I don't know how you walk out of this draft without another premier playmaker in round 1, 2, 3. It's insane to me. And I really like the guys they got, considering the value with Ezeraku and Revel. I mean, those are great value picks there in the second and third round. 2 guys who a lot of people had projected in the first round. I like Jaden Blue. I actually think Jaden Blue is like a really nice kind of receiving back, change of pace option for them. Not what they need. They need like a legitimate full-time back, but I like you said, it's hard to square away the value at pick 12. They took our only player below a 4 relative athletic score in our top 90 consensus on our big board with me, you, Ryan, and Dives, who didn't work out at the combine with a broken back. Dion Walker was also below a 4, but he was working out of the combine with literally a fractured spine. So I'd say that's a little different than Tyler Booker. Like you said, an interior O lineman, when you're not a good team that has limited athleticism, I think that's a wild pick at pick 12.
Yeah. So you gave them a C+, right?
C+. Yeah, I went C+. You could convince me to go just down to a flat C easier than into the B's, I think, just because, man, you really, really needed another weapon to compete, I think.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go on to the New York Giants, who selected Abdul Carter at 3 overall and then traded back into the first round for Jackson Dart. Took Darius Alexander in the 3rd round, Cam Scatabo, Marcus Imbo on day 3, and then a couple other guys. They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 5 top 100 players for each of us. And again, we both had the same best and worst value. Marcus Imbo on day 3, he was 75 for me, 84 for you. They got him at 154. That's great value. We both had the same worst value, and it's Jackson Dart. I had him at 65. You had him at 55. They took him at 25. And I will at least say for Dart, they didn't pay an exorbitant price to move up. They gave up a 3rd this year and a 3rd next year to move up from the 2nd round. So I'll at least give him that on a dart throw. I don't love the player. At least it wasn't an exorbitant trade up. But my biggest draft regret for them is the 45-point Drew Lock Week 17 performance that cost them the 2nd overall pick and the chance to get a future first-round pick simply to move back to 5 like the Browns did. Man, when that trade hit, that was immediately where my mind went. As an Eagles guy, I was like, man, I'm glad Drew Lock pulled that off and the Giants didn't take that deal because I thought that was a huge trade. And I'm glad that the Giants aren't the one with all that extra capital. So I didn't love the Dart trade up, but I did give them an A overall because I liked their 1st and their 3rd pick value-wise, and then I thought they picked up some guys I really liked in day 3 as well.
And, we'll talk about the AFC next podcast, but my same thought went to Tennessee, where I was like, man, you must love Cam Ward. That is some kind of package right there to move down from 2. I would have taken that package to move down from 1 without the 2nd round pick. Like I would have taken 5 in next year's 1st alone, to be honest. So, the Abdul Carter thing, congratulations. You took, a highly ranked player at pick number 3 at a position that you don't really need. So I'm not really going to let the Carter pick impact my grade here because it's kind of, it was the right pick, I guess. But like you were picking 3 and it wasn't, you're strengthening a strength on a team full of weaknesses. So, and I kind of feel the same way about Darius Alexander, who I'm a little lower on than I think other people. I have him I don't have it right in front of me, but I think I had him 60th and he went 65th. Fine value. Also, though, you have Dexter Lawrence and you have a ton of other needs. Like I don't get going edge and D tackle with 2 of your first non-quarterback, your 2 first non-quarterback picks. I love the Cam Scatterby value. Again, you have Tyrone Tracy as a rookie from last year. Do you really, should that have been, where you went? We could argue he was just the best player available. I had him like 66. They got him 105. It is good value. And then Mbow's great value. But I still had him like 85th. So am I really going to go crazy and rank their draft really good because I like these guys who they got, and it's 66 and 85. Do I love those values so much at 105 and 154 that I'm going to ignore the fact that for me, they kind of prioritized the wrong thing getting better at in this draft. And then not to mention the main reason I don't like this draft is because I think I'm higher on Jackson Dart than a lot of people are. I think he's very Bo Nix-esque, but you trade back up into the 1st. And again, it's 2nd and 2/3. So I get that they didn't give up a future 1st. They're not the Atlanta Falcons, but I still, this is Brian Dable and Joe Shane's like he's their ticket to keeping their job. I don't know if I would pin my hopes to keeping my job on any quarterback in this draft class, especially Jackson Dart. And I know that I think this is where we disagree. And we both kind of agree. The Shedeur thing was crazy, like where Shedeur ended up getting drafted. And we're going to have to talk about that anytime a quarterback comes up. And I get that it's kind of unfair to talk about this guy who went in the first compared to a guy who went in the 5th round. But I think it's also hard for me to separate feeling like you need to trade up for Jackson Dart when Shedeur went on day 3. And even Jalen Milroe, if you want to say him, went at 92. So I think the value, even if you wouldn't have had to trade up for Dart at 25, would have been horrible. And then you traded up for him. And whether, future third, a second and a third this year, it's not a crazy trade, but I don't see a lot of scenarios where Jackson Dart works out in New York.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into the Shedeur conversation, I think, a little bit later, or maybe we should just have it right now. I'll put my cards on the table with the Shedeur thing. So my thing with Shedeur Sanders is he fell out of the first round because he had second round tape. To me, it's not a guy that when you watched him, I looked at him and said, yeah, this should be a first round quarterback. Now I understand those guys get pushed up the board sometimes, like it just happened to Jackson Dart. But so he gets pushed out of the first round. That's tape based. Him falling out of day 2 is because of how he approached the pre-draft process and teams not liking that, teams not being comfortable with that. The thing for me becomes once you get to day 3, I fault literally every team that didn't take him in the 4th round. Because at that point, like the surplus value of taking a swing at a quarterback that, again, I'm not super high on, but I had a day 2 grade on, or a round 2 grade on, the surplus value for that guy in the 4th round, in the 5th round, even if he is just a 4-year backup quarterback, that's an important position. I mean, to the point that like when the Browns traded up ahead of the Eagles and took him in the 5th round, and I think it was Schefter said that they thought the Eagles were going to take him, and people were like, the Eagles wouldn't do that. I was like, the Eagles absolutely should have done that. Like, I don't care that you have Tanner McKee and Jalen Hurts, like taking that dart throw on a guy. And the Eagles ended up taking a dart throw on Kyle McCord in the 6th round. Like every team in the NFL, bar none, should have taken Shedeur Sanders in the 4th round, in my opinion, because the surplus, if he hits, that's amazing value. And again, it's a guy with a round 2 grade for me. And if he doesn't hit, if he comes in and he's a locker room problem, cut him. It's a 4th round pick. It doesn't matter. So that was kind of my thoughts on the Shedeur thing. I guess I'll just put that out there now because he's going to come up as we talk about some of these other teams. So what were your kind of overall thoughts on the Shedeur slide?
Yeah, I mean, I agree almost universally with what you said. I will say it's annoying. Like, I feel like everybody thinks they have the answer on like, this is the reason he fell. And it's like, no, it's a combination of like 8 things. Like how you just laid out. It's there was issues with his tape, and then you don't want to bring in a backup who's going to cause him so much attention. And then you have the dad aspect of all of it. And then you have the way he approached interviews. And then you have just, there's so many levels to it, in my opinion, that it's hard to point to any one thing. But yeah, I totally agree. Every team should have taken a look at him in day 3. And I totally agree that if it went wrong, you could have got rid of him, no strings attached. But I guess it's hard for me to not look at it when looking at specifically the Dart and Shuck and Gabriel picks. Those 3 picks are the ones that I go back to, and I'm like, man, I don't care. I don't care how Shedeur interviewed. Like, there's just the Dart one. Actually, if you want to say you like Dart more than Shedeur, I think it's wrong. But I'm not as crazy. I think trading up into first when Shedeur played out how it has, it's a little hindsight 2020 to say that. Oh well. But Shuck, there's no argument for him going above Shedeur, let alone going top 40. And then Dylan Gabriel, there's no argument. If you as a team were able to get there eventually and pick Shedeur in the 5th round, there's no argument that you should have taken Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. Like, and we'll get to that more next week. But those are the 3 picks that I'm kind of willing to criticize the teams more than anyone on. You clearly had a position of need at quarterback. You went and picked a quarterback, and you let Shedeur slide to the 5th round. But I agree with you. There's plenty of teams that absolutely should have taken a shot. How did the Rams not take a shot? You know, when you have Matt Stafford at age 50, it feels like. And my buddies put it the best way. Like, I forget who, someone at my radio station kind of pitched it as you draft Shedeur, you put out state-sponsored media for the next 3 months about how great of a guy he is and how great he's doing with the system and how he's really taking the backup role in stride, yada, yada, yada. And then you display him in a preseason game. Maybe you leave a couple starters out there to make him look better. And if he has a big outing, maybe, in a couple weeks, if somebody went down, maybe you get, a 3rd rounder for Shedeur. And at that point, that's a fantastic pick in the 5th round or the 4th round. So I think that there was some value missed for a lot of teams with that kind of scenario, especially the Eagles. Like, there's a lot of teams that could do that. And I think the next couple months of content of the team putting out, oh, this guy's doing great, it'll ring hollow. But if you're the Eagles, if you're the Chiefs, if you're the Bills, if you're, these respected organizations who have done well with quarterbacks or have great coaches, San Fran, like whoever it could have been, San Fran actually absolutely should have done that. Yeah. I can't believe they didn't. Now that I'm thinking about it, he would have been a perfect Shanahan kind of guy. Whatever. That's a whole other topic. We'll get to their great draft later on.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep rolling here. We'll finish out the NFC East with the Washington Commanders. Took Josh Connerly in the 1st round, Trey Amos in the 2nd round, and then a trio of day 3 picks. 2 top 100 picks, 2 top 100 players for each of us. I have the best value as Trey Amos, who they took at 61. I had him at 31. Ironically, you have Trey Amos as their worst value. You don't have a best value for him, and I don't have a worst value for him. So we're at odds on the Trey Amos thing. We just saw him quite a bit differently. But I said my biggest regret for them was not taking a swing on a pass rusher. This is a team that needs trench help. And, I mean, I don't fault where they went, offensive line, defensive back in their first 2 picks. I would have liked to have seen them at least take a day 3 swing on a pass rusher. And so to walk out without a pass rusher feels like a bit of a miss. They also didn't have a ton of capital. I gave them a C+ overall. This draft doesn't move me a lot. What about you?
Yeah, it was really hard for me to pick the worst value between Connerly and Amos because I think both are positions of need for Washington and both were pretty close. Like, I think I had Connerly around 40 something and he went 29, and then I had Amos 62 and he went 61. The reason I went with Amos is just like you said, I think there was such a clear needed pass rusher. I don't know what my dog's doing, but there was such a clear needed pass rusher that I thought that should have been the pick there with Landon Jackson, Princely, a couple of those guys still on the board that I think should have went in the 1st round, let alone the 2nd round, and lasted all the way to the 3rd. Also, I put Amos because I knew I'd talk about Connerly and the regret. My regret is I think Josh Simmons was like a true chance at a franchise tackle. I had him graded out as a top 10 guy. I understand that there's injury concerns, but I kind of look at it, and I think I said this on the draft stream, but I look at it like the Eagles when they took Landon Dickerson at the top of the 2nd round, where this was a guy, in my opinion, Josh Simmons, if he was fully healthy, he might have been the pick at 4 to New England as the top tackle in the draft, and definitely would have went in the top 10. I think he would have got picked above Kelvin Banks if he was healthy. And Kansas City got to walk away with a steal at 32 with a guy who you don't get swings at a franchise right tackle in the draft if you're Kansas City and the Eagles picking where they do year in and year out, but they got the benefit of doing it because of the injury thing. Washington could have made that same choice. If Washington picked Josh Simmons at 29, my grade goes from a C to like a B+ because I think Josh Simmons does have true, like, I don't know about all pro potential, but true, top line offensive tackle starter, which we know is, $100 million or $80+ million contract position.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep rolling here. We'll pick it up now that we're out of the NFC East. Let's go to the NFC North, and we'll start with the Detroit Lions, who took Tyleik Williams in the 1st round, Tate Ratledge in the 2nd round, Isaac Tesla in the 3rd round, and then they had 4 4th-round picks. They had 2 They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 2 top 100 players for each of us. Same best value, same worst value. Tate Ratledge, best value. Tyleik Williams, the worst value. I had Ratledge at 28. They drafted him at 57. I had Williams at 57, and they drafted him at 28. So literally, it's funny. If they had flipped those two, they would have drafted both of them in the exact slots that I had them. I said my biggest regret for them was taking Tesla instead of Elik Iomanor. They wouldn't have had to trade up for Iomanor. He went a little later. And Iomanor is like a great run blocker, a power slot guy. He would have been a perfect fit for the Lions' run-heavy offense. I thought he would have been a great culture fit, great guy for them to bring in. Overall, I didn't like the Lions draft. I gave them a D-. What about you?
Of course, I just went away from next. I wanted to look up exactly what that Tesla trade was. I gave them a D. Yeah, so I guess I was slightly higher. That Tesla trade, they gave up a third rounder this year in 2025. That was 102. They gave up a third rounder next year and an extra third rounder and 2 6th-round picks for just that pick at 70. So that seems insane to me for a guy who, I don't know if he was definitely going to go before 102. And maybe they had some intel. Brad Holmes said, I love all the picks, but I'll give you this, though. The pick that was probably the most questioned, I would say, was Isaac Tesla. I can say without a doubt that he was my favorite wide receiver in this draft. I'm not saying he was the best wide receiver in the draft, but favorite wide receiver in the draft? Yes. What does that mean? Like, I guess we have like our helmet sticker guys, and he's trying to say that in that way, but like that seems they always have crazy quotes after the draft, and it's hard. We hate them every year, and they've had a lot of picks pan out. So I guess maybe we're the idiots. I think they've also had some picks not pan out too that get forgotten. But I really hated the Tyleik Williams pick. I really hated the Isaac Tesla trade. They didn't make any picks on day 3 that were in my top 100, so they didn't get any like extra value. They got a good value in Tate Ratledge, who I had 41, goes 57. So good value there. That was a position of need, so good pick for that. But not enough to bring this draft up, in my opinion.
Yeah, he is. Tesla's 23 years old and has under 900 career receiving yards. So I don't know.
I don't get it.
Didn't love it. That's going to be a theme, by the way, for this division, but we'll get there. Let's go to the Green Bay Packers.
I meant to send this to you, by the way. I guess I think they drafted the top 4 combined RAS draft classes.
These 4 teams?
Yeah, the NFC North. So maybe we just hate athletes. But I think maybe it wasn't the top 4. Maybe it was like 4 of the top 5 or 4 of the top 10. But I saw the Math Bomb guy tweet out, like, what do you notice here? And it was like all NFC North teams. So they just purely went to the combine and they were like, that's all the research we're doing.
Maybe that's it. Well, let's get into the Packers draft class. The Packers took Matthew Golden in the first round, Anthony Belton in the second round, Savion Williams in the third round, and then a bunch of day 3 picks. They had 3 top 100 picks, took 2 top 100 players for each of us. I did not give them a best value. There's not a player that they picked that I thought was a great value, which sounds real hater-ish, but and then the worst value for me was Anthony Belton. He wasn't in my top 100, and they took him at 54. So I said my biggest regret for them is building a team entirely out of number 2 wide receivers. Like they have like 4 number 2s and they still don't have a wide receiver 1. But at least they're drafting wide receivers now. So I guess that's good. Matthew Golden, Savion Williams, they've invested a lot. It seems like Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, they still don't have a number 1.
I feel like we're forgetting one too.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
Dontavian Wicks.
I think there's and Jaden Reed, who's probably their wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so they've got like 6 wide receiver 2s. It's crazy. I gave him a D overall. What about you?
Yeah, I gave him a D also. And this is maybe one that I'm thinking now, like looking at it, I might have been too mean because I actually only had 2 real positions of need coming in for the Packers. And looking when I went through the team needs, and I know that I was such a Packers guy last year, and then they flamed out. And I would argue that they actually competed with the Super Bowl champions in that first round, looking back at it. But going through the team needs, my biggest takeaway in the entire exercise was like, Packers are pretty ready for next year. Like, and that, I guess we've been saying that, like, I think it was, you were all in on them the first year they made the playoffs, before the year you picked them to win the division. And they were like the youngest team in football then. I think they were the youngest team again this year. So they've had continuity. They have not a lot of needs, but they had a wide receiver need, and they went out and they spent 2 of their first 3 picks at receiver. Were they the exact picks I would have made? Probably not. Like, I would have taken Trey Harris. I put the biggest regret is taking Golden over Trey Harris and Jaden Higgins. I know I'm a little higher on Higgins than a lot of people. I will say there might be a higher upside with Golden than with Higgins. So if you're saying Green Bay, you have all these number 2 wide receivers, but you clearly need that game breaker. I actually, like, the reason I think I might be too low at D is because I think Golden at 23 is probably the right pick. Besides Trey Harris, I would have picked Trey Harris, but outside of him, they needed to take a receiver, and and he's got the speed to be a game breaker potentially in that LaFleur offense. So maybe they could figure out some way to use him that they don't really have for all the guys that they do have. I don't think they have a guy with the speed of Golden on that depth chart. So at least he has that differentiator, and then Savion has the size to profile with the upside to be maybe a top line receiver. I think there's a lot of questions with Savion. I think I had him like 80, maybe in the 70s. So they picked him at 87. I listed it as a good value because it was, you picked a receiver in the 3rd round, which was a need. And maybe I should have put this as the regret. Belton was a bad pick. I don't get that. I don't think he's a good player. They should have taken an edge there with Princely and Landon, who I think I'm just going to say every team should have taken Princely or Landon. But that would have been a good pick there. And if you walked out of this draft with Golden, one of them at the 2nd round, and Savion, I think this goes from a D to like a B- or a B for me.
All right. Let's keep rolling on to the Minnesota Vikings then.
Real quick, though, that Baron Sorrell celebration of him being, by the way, bizarre that he's at the draft. Why did the NFL invite Baron Sorrell to the draft? I don't know if you saw this, but they announced the pick. And Goodell came out in the middle of the 4th when he hadn't been seen all day. And he's like, this is a big deal. He's here with us today. And the Packers picked the guy who happened to be there, the last guy in the room. But it's like, the NFL, why are you inviting this guy who is like, I hadn't even really heard of in the process, and goes in the 4th round? But it was a cool moment. The crowd went nuts for him. And he like ran through the tunnel and like smacked the Green Bay logo. It was a cool moment, but it seems bizarre to me.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to the Minnesota Vikings, who took Donovan Jackson in the 1st round, Ty Felton in the 3rd round, and then 3 day 3 picks. Neither one of us gave him the best value, which tells you a lot about where we're headed here. My worst value was Donovan Jackson, who I had at 36 overall, and they took him at 24. Like, okay, like we're getting into the range in the late 20, like mid to late 20s, where I'm okay with you taking a really clean guard prospect. I'm not super okay with that when you only have 4 picks in the whole draft and you take an interior offensive lineman in the 1st, a guy I didn't have a 1st round grade on, when we know beyond the shadow of a doubt the Eagles were calling to move up to that pick.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that. They make one top 100 pick. It was a top 100 player, but I gave this draft an F. I thought Minnesota really, you come in short, you come in already in trouble with only having 4 picks, but I didn't think they used those picks well.
And yeah, I don't want to go too long on them. There's not much to talk about. I agree with everything you said. They should have traded down, but if you weren't going to trade down, and interior line was my 3rd biggest need for them. So I get it. They did need help there. My 2 biggest needs, and this is a theme for a lot of teams in this draft, in a draft that I feel like had a lot of DBs, especially corners. There was a lot of teams who I felt like had gaping needs at either corner or safety, or both in some cases. And this is a team that had needs at both. They are, Harrison Smith is not getting any younger. He is 36 years old. They have a mid Josh Metellus guy next to him who starts. You have Byron Murphy, who was really solid last year. They signed Isaiah Rodgers to be your number 2 corner. Point out who the guy who they're going to be relying on to take down snaps outside of that on their roster. Jeff Okudah, who's bounced around the league. Mekhi Blackman. Like, they don't have anything at corner. And safety, they should have been kind of looking towards the future with Smith at age 36. if you're going to stick and pick at 24, you've got Hairston on the board. You've got Malachi Starks on the board. Nick, you got any safety you want is on the board. There hadn't been a safety drafted. Benjamin Morrison still out there. Trey Amos, you like Trey Amos. There's a ton of corners who they could have taken at 24. That pick should have been a DB if it wasn't a trade down.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep rolling to Chicago. And they had, hold on. Let me get them up on the screen here.
Weird draft.
Yeah, they take Colston Loveland in the first round, Luther Burden in the second, Ozzie Trapilo in the second, Shamar Turner in the second, and then some day 4 picks. Kyle Monungai in the 7th, which is a guy I would have loved the Eagles to take. I did not give them a best value. Nothing impressed me, which again probably tips where I'm headed with my grade. Worst value I had was Shamar Turner, who I had at 101, and they took him at 62. My biggest regret for them is going back-to-back pass catchers, Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, with your first 2 picks at the expense of investing in their defensive line. Like Jalen Walker or Walter Nolan was there round 1. Nick Scorton, TJ Williams was there round 2. Like, take one of those guys and then invest in the defensive line with the other one. That keeps you from reaching for Shamar Turner in the late second round. I didn't trace it out far enough to see where I would have gone there, but overall, I just thought they misplayed the board, even though I like Colston Loveland for their offense. And I think I like Luther Burden for their offense, but I just didn't like they have invested so much into weapons and a quarterback. Like, help out your defense, build your offensive line. And I just felt like they went for all flash again in the draft. So I gave them a D overall.
I feel like I'm actually fine with them going heavy on the pass catchers, and I think that's why I went with C instead of D. I'm going to quibble with the guys they took. I agree. Shamar Turner was the worst value, didn't make my top 100, but Ben Johnson and for that instance, Ryan Poles, they're going to be kind of judged based on what happens with Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams is a generational quarterback prospect, or at least was. I thought he was when he got drafted, and so did many others. And it's going to be on them to make it work and to make it work fast. And Ben Johnson, you're an offensive guy. I think Ben Johnson thinks, give me the guys on offense. We'll figure out the rest later. And I don't know if that's the wrong. I don't know if that's the wrong thought process. My problem is each of the 3 picks I don't have a problem with. Like Loveland at 10, I had him 12. Probably a pretty good pick, relatively. All the options that they could have made at pick 10, picking the guys that's 12th overall, pretty good. Luther Burden, they had him at 39, but I had him a little lower than that. At that point, I think he was my highest rated receiver available because Golden was gone, Higgins was gone, Trey Harris was gone, I think. So all 3 of those guys gone at that point. I think Burden, if you had to take a receiver, is the guy I would have taken. Ozzie Trapilo, that's a guy where I like Trapilo a lot. I thought I was like the highest guy on Trapilo, having him like 60 something. And they take him at 56 while Wyatt Milam and a couple other guys are still on the board. So I have quibbles with the guys they took, but I actually don't have a problem with them going heavy on offense and on weapons. So I gave him a C. I'm kind of meh on this draft. Weird draft because they didn't make the right pick anywhere, but they didn't make a pick that I want to like kill. Even Shamar Turner, I'm not a fan. There are people who really, really like him, and he's a crazy athlete. So, like, it's not a pick where it's like, I don't get it at all. I understand it. I'm kind of just walking away pretty meh from this draft.
All right, so that takes care of the NFC North. Let's get to the NFC South, and we'll start off here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who took Emeka Egbuka in the first round. Then they took Benjamin Morrison in the second round, Jacob Parrish in the third round, and a trio of day 3 picks. They had 3 top 100 picks, and they got 3 of my top 100 players, 2 for you. My best value for them was Tez Johnson, wide receiver out of Oregon. He was number 100 on my board. They got him all the way at 235. Now, he's tiny. There's a reason he fell, but maybe he works out. I thought he was a good dart throw. Jacob Parrish was my worst value. I had him at 101. They took him at 84. So it's not awful, but it was a little bit of a reach for me. My biggest regret for them is taking Egbuka in the first round over Jahad Campbell. This is a team that, like, they've got a lot of wide receivers already. You have Chris Godwin, you have Mike Evans, you have who was their wide receiver 3 that kind of broke out last year?
Washington, Jalen McMillan.
McMillan, yeah. And so to take Egbuka, and I like Egbuka, and I understand, like, you are sitting there watching the wide receiver market explode. Godwin and Evans are older. Maybe there's we've got a defensive head coach. We trust him with the defense. Let's surround Baker, a quarterback we think we can win with, especially in this division. So I like Egbuka, but like Jahad Campbell would have been a perfect fit for this defense, and Todd Bowles. And that's the direction I would have liked to have seen him go in the first round. I gave him a B overall. I like players they selected. Just wish they would have handled that first round a little bit differently.
Yeah, I'm not even going to talk too much more about it. You totally encapsulated everything. I think Benjamin Morrison's one of my favorite picks of the draft, though. I had him 11th, so that was the slight. I went B instead of B minus just because of how much I love that pick, and I think it was the position in need to. And Walker, Elijah Roberts, Tez Johnson, I think all three there's reasons to buy in on. I wasn't as in on any of those players as a lot of other people were, but there's reasons for excitement on every day 3 pick they made. So I like a lot of what they did. Totally agree with you on Egbuka. That pick should have been Starks, Emmanuel, or Jahad Campbell, I would say.
All right, let's go on to the Carolina Panthers. They took Tet McMillan in the first round, Nick Scorton in the second round, Princely Uman Mielen in the third round, and then day 3. They had 3 top 100 picks, got 3 top 100 players for each of us. We both said their best value was Princely Uman Mielen. I had him at 42. They took him at 77. Neither of us gave him a worst value either. My biggest regret for them, though, was not taking Benjamin Morrison in the second round. Especially, I mean, it's hindsight, but when you know you could get Princely in the third round, like, Princely would have absolutely been my pick in the third round. I would have been fine with Princely in the second round, but now I wish in hindsight they'd taken Benjamin Morrison over Nick Scorton. I think it would have helped fill out that room a little better. But overall, I gave him a B+. I thought they had a really solid draft. You get a weapon for Bryce Young. We're going to surround him with some talent and see, is he the guy? Is he not? We can still figure that out while making big investments into our defense. I really liked what the Panthers did.
Yeah, this was close to being my number 1 draft in the entire NFL. I loved it. It's my second favorite draft in the NFL. And Tet was the exact pick that I was begging multiple teams in the top 10 with young quarterbacks to make. I think New England should have made it at 4. I think you could argue that should have been the pick at 5 for Cleveland. I think absolutely it was the right pick at 8 for Carolina. There was a lot of rumors that they wanted Jalen Walker and that was going to be the pick at number 8, and they viewed him as an edge, actually. Well, you went out and you got Scorton and Uman Mielen. So, and I know I would have went Morrison instead of Scorton too, but it's hard for me to pick too much nit with Scorton. I think I had like 34 overall, and they got him at 51. And I know a lot of people, Dives, I know, has him like top 10, top 15. So a lot of people really, really like him. And I think there is a lot of reasons to like Scorton. And then Princely, they got a first round guy in the third round. So they got 3 top 36 guys for me, 1 top 4 guy, 2 top 20 guys, and they only had 1 first round pick. They didn't trade up at all. Like they stuck and picked. I love what Carolina did. Did they trade down in the second, actually?
I'm not. Yeah, they had to have, because they would have been up higher. Looks like they traded with Denver. Looks like every pick they had outside of the first round was involved in some sort of trade, but I don't have the details here on the little.
Yeah, and they might have been earlier on. Yeah, who knows? They could have been pre-draft trades and whatever. But yeah, I love those first 3 picks. And there's also picks that people like really like Ransom, Jimmy Horn Jr. I actually think that there's potentially some value in. But yeah, one of my favorite draft classes. And Carolina I actually, before the draft, I went through the over-unders for wins for each team just to get like an idea of what the NFL thought before the draft. And Carolina is one of those teams that I saw and I was like, they'll probably win like 7 or 8 games again next year. And now I'm, you're thinking it over. They really made strides with Bryce Young last year. Canales did a really good job. You get multiple edge rushers, which was a big problem for them. You bring in a legit receiver, which should help guys like Leggett kind of fall under that top receiver. maybe they could make some noise. The Panthers are, I think, got a lot more interesting.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the Atlanta Falcons. Man, I am really having a hard time working both of these things. I should have had I needed something put together a little bit better here, but there we go. Falcons picks are up on the screen now. Jalen Walker in the first round, then they traded back in for James Pierce Jr. At the end of the third round, they took Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman in the fourth round, Jack Nelson in the seventh round. My best they had 3 top 100 picks, 4 top 100 players for each of us. Both of us said the best value was Xavier Watts. I had him at 24. They got him at 96. I did not love that they then took another safety and Billy Bowman 22 picks later. It's like, let's just double. We're a bad defense. Let's double dip at 2 positions. But my worst value for them was James Pierce Jr. And that's for the trade up cost, not the overall selection, because that's a good pick value wise. But my biggest regret is trading a future first for a non-QB, something I'm almost always out on. We'll get to that with the Jags next week. But not just that, they traded a future first so they could draft a second edge rusher that is 7th percentile for weight in the same draft. You can only get so many small guys on the field at once. And when you spend 3 first-round picks essentially on 2 sub-7th percentile edge rushers, I don't like that, especially when you see guys like Scorton and Green and Princely that would have been there in the second round anyways. So despite the fact I love the Watts pick, I love the Bowman pick, Pierce was a good value relative to that spot for me. I gave the draft a C- because they leveraged so much future capital for 2 guys I just don't really see working together.
Yeah, it's hard for me to go lower than a C just because they got 3 players who I think are really good. They got 3 of my top 30 players, and they got 2 of my top 16 players, and James Pierce, who's a top 5 guy for me. I'm higher than anybody you'll find on James Pierce. The weight doesn't concern me at all. I think James Pierce is going to be awesome. Jalen Walker is the guy I'm more skeptical on. If you're picking at 15 and you like James Pierce enough to trade a future first for him, take James Pierce at 15. I think I agree with you. Doubling up it. I have less of a problem doubling up at safety. That's might have just been a position where they could not believe Watts or Bowman was there when they took those selections. And I thought both were good values. I have more of a problem with taking Jalen Walker and Pierce. And they're right. Taking 2 anomalies at the same position is definitely, something a bad GM does, in my opinion. Something a GM who pays a quarterback $200 million and then drafts a quarterback 8th a month later would do. It seems like the Falcons just have very little foresight. It's oh my God, this is available. We have to do it. Kirk Cousins, obviously he's an upgrade. Wait, Michael Penix, we have to draft Michael Penix. Wait, Jalen Walker, we have to draft Jalen Walker. Wait, we can get James Pierce too. It seems like there's just very little all right, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to do this next. There's just, this is what we're going to do right now. And we'll take the next decision. It's just a very bizarre way that they conduct business. But getting my number 16 player at 96, it's hard for me to hate too much. I love that Xavier Watts pick. Us trading out of it and that pick becoming Watts makes me sad.
Yeah. It's a big statement on how much I hate the trade that I still gave it a C- because I like the value of some of the other players. So, quick question here coming in before we get to the Saints. Asked post-draft, AFC or NFC, who is stronger, Mark?
AFC.
Yeah, I don't know that anything changed in the calculus just based off the draft. So I would say AFC, but I think there's 2 teams in the NFC that still have really legitimate Super Bowl chances, in the Eagles and the Lions. And I will say I don't think the Lions really helped themselves that much in the draft. So
I think the Lions, and this is I feel like I hate them every year, but I think the Lions are going to drop out of that tier. Losing
without Ben Johnson,
losing both coordinators. They lost a ton of pieces, especially on the defense. Not a great draft, in our opinion. It's not like they made big splashes in free agency. Kind of just tried to keep a lot of guys, which is what you probably should do. I actually think Green Bay ends up winning that division. I think Green Bay ends up being the real contender that kind of steps up to us. But I've said that this year too, and it didn't really happen. Although, like I said again, you could argue they played us way tougher than Washington or Kansas City.
Yeah. He says, feels like Washington, the Lions, the Eagles are greater than the Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills at this point. I don't think I agree with that.
I think the Eagles are the best team still, probably, but
yeah, I would say Eagles are the best. I do anticipate a fall off for the Lions, and I anticipate some second-year regression for Washington as well. Maybe not, but even if they don't, that Chiefs, Ravens, Bills trio is just really good. That's really, really strong conference.
We're going to talk about a team. I think one of the winners of the draft is the Chargers. I thought the Chargers did fantastic. But Marion Hampton, you're such a running team, and now you add that dynamic guy who I think could be like a top 15 running back right away. I think the Chargers might be a legit full-on Super Bowl contender next year. So that's yet another piece, another team that I would kind of elevate in that AFC. And then, you have to put Cincy in the conversation. They made the Super Bowl somewhat recently. I think they have a lot of problems, but they did hire a new defensive coordinator. Joe Burrow's good at football. So I think the AFC is still stronger.
We'll get into some ranking shows later this offseason, though. Maybe we'll do some top 10 defenses, top 10 offenses, some projections, stuff like that. But let's get into the last team in the NFC South. It is the New Orleans Saints. They had 4 top 100 picks, took 3 top 100 players for each of us. Kelvin Banks Jr. in the first round, Tyler Shuck in the second round, Vernon Brighton in the third round, Jonas Sanker in the third round, Danny Stutzman in the fourth round, and then some other guys. For me, my best value pick for them was running back Devin Neal, who they got at 184. I had him at number 95. Worst value was Tyler Shuck. My biggest draft regret for them is just literally their entire first 2 rounds. Kelvin Banks was a massive reach. Tyler Shuck was beyond a massive reach. And when you tank your first 2 picks like that, it doesn't matter to me that you get Danny Stutzman, a guy I had a second round grade on in the fourth, that you get Devin Neal 100 picks after where I had him almost. This draft was a D for me.
Yeah, and it would have been an F if you didn't get 2 guys I like in Stutzman and Neal. But yeah, I mean, Banks and Shuck, there's not much more to add. It's the viral video of Shuck throwing over the middle at the combine that we aired like 10 times during the draft stream with Ryan and Dives was very, very funny. And then everything about taking Kelvin Banks 9th is ridiculous. I think I had Kelvin Banks 47. I could be wrong there, but he was somewhere in my 40s. I really, really don't get the way that the Saints draft. I feel bad for Kellen Moore. He's going to be back in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't feel too bad for Kelvin Moore. For Kelvin, did I just say Kelvin Moore?
Well, we're talking about Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, I don't feel too bad for Kelvin Banks because, I mean, this is like the most obvious thing that they're a terrible roster and that you're going to be a lame duck coach. And so, I mean, you made your choice. You chased the money. That's fine. Like, I don't bear him any ill will, but it seemed pretty obvious the direction that was going to go. And I will say I did have Kelvin Banks higher than most. I had him at like 19, but still at 9. That was too rich, I thought, for sure.
Yeah, bad draft.
All right, let's go to our last division, the NFC West. Let's start with the San Francisco 49ers, who took Mykel Williams in the first round, Alfred Collins in the second round, Nick Martin in the third, Upton Stout in the third, and then a whole load of day 3 picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 day 3 picks. Yeah. So they made a lot of picks, 11 total picks in the draft. And for my best value, I did not have one. My worst value was Mykel Williams, who I had at 52, and they took him at 11. They had 4 top 100 picks. They got 2 top 100 players for me, 1 top 100 player for you. My biggest regret for them was that you have 11 picks and you didn't address offensive line until pick 249, a comp pick in the 7th round. When O-line has been a major issue for you, I thought they were way too heavy on the defensive line. And this draft was an F. This is one of my least favorite drafts in the NFL.
Yeah, it is my number 1 least favorite draft in the NFL for me. And they have 11 picks, 4 in the top 100, and they got 1 top 100 guy for me. So they didn't recoup any value on day 3. They didn't take anyone above where I had them. Like, I initially have put Alfred Collins as the worst value. I think you could just say all of day two. I didn't rank any of their day two picks in my top 100, and they took them at 43, 75, and 100. Like you said, O-line, I think you can make the same thing about corner. I think corner was a desperate need for them as well, and you don't address it until pick 36 of round 3. Upton Stout, a guy from Western Kentucky who, and maybe this is me not knowing ball, I did not research Upton Stout in our pre-draft process, so I missed out. Maybe he's the gem, and I missed it. There were plenty of guys still available that I think could have been wiser picks at positions of need earlier at corner. Plenty of picks they could have made at 11, 43, and 75 to help out corner or O-line. They went neither direction, stayed in the front 7, where I actually feel like they're still relatively strong. I don't get it. I don't get the way this team drafted. Did you know that their win total in Vegas is 10.5? And it's minus 150.
I would smash the under.
It's insane. People I don't get what I'm missing. And
this team is primed to implode.
And maybe it's just Shanahan's that good that it's so hard for him to implode. What did they go last year? They won 7-8 games. They pick 11th. I'm trying to. They probably won 7 games. If I had to guess, I think they went 7-10.
They won 6 games, 6-11.
6-11, yeah. So it's not that hard. It just happened. And I don't think the team is as good as it was going into last year. And obviously a lot of injuries happened, but they'll have better injury luck. We don't know if they'll have good injury luck. And they have a ton of guys who get hurt a lot. So I think there's a chance the NFC West is pretty weak. You look at Seattle. I really like their draft. We're going to get into 2 drafts I really like in this division. But Seattle, Sam Darnold, you're rolling the dice with Sam Darnold in a system where, they won 9 games and didn't improve last year. Arizona, I've officially announced, I think it's a joke that they're announcing or that they're bringing back a head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback who have failed 2 straight years together. And I think this is a team primed to get worse here in San Francisco. And like you said, implode. The Rams are kind of, I think, going to win the division just by default. I have a lot of questions about the Rams too, but weird division. I don't see any real contender coming out of this division by any means.
It's funny that the 49ers lost the Super Bowl in 2019 and 2023. They followed up both Super Bowl losing seasons with 6-win seasons.
Yeah, it takes a lot out of you. It does, especially when you don't get to celebrate.
Yep. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to the Rams. You just mentioned them. They took Terrence Ferguson in the 2nd round, Josiah Stewart in the 3rd round, and then some day 3 guys. They had 2 top 100 picks. 3 top 100 picks. No, I wrote it backwards. 2 top 100 picks. They got 3 top 100 players for me. My best value was Chris Paul Jr. That they got at 172. I had him at 87. That was also your best value. We both listed worst value of Terrence Ferguson. I had him at 71. They took him at 46. My biggest regret for them is passing on Shedeur in the 4th round. That's the pick. They should have brought him in. This should have been the Shedeur team. Imagine Shedeur behind Matthew Stafford and a Sean McVay offense a year or 2 from now. Could have been a really good setting, big market for him, a big city, I guess, for him. Maybe not a big market in Los Angeles, but I gave him a B. It's largely because they acquired that 1st round pick, fleecing the Falcons, because this draft doesn't move the needle for me. I didn't like the players that much, but I do really like the future value they recouped. It can let them go be in play for QB1 next year with 2 1st round picks, especially if the bottom drops out on them this year.
I gave them a C because I didn't really like any pick they made. So it's hard for me to give them too much credit, but it's a great trade. Is there any argument, and I think no, is there any argument that the Rams should be trying to kind of compete for a Super Bowl this year? They gave the Eagles a run for their money. You go out, you pay an older guy in Devontae Adams. Is there an argument that maybe instead of trading back, you should have just taken the best player available that could help you right away? Or is it just such insane value that you can't say no to it?
I kind of feel like that was just insane value.
I agree. I think I agree. Yeah.
I I don't think I would have necessarily been actively shopping it, but I'm probably not turning down a future first in that situation, especially from the Falcons, a team that has had a top 10 pick 4 out of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
In the worst division in football, by the way.
And it opens you up to be aggressive if there's someone who comes available in the middle of the season. Like whoever that could, Micah Parsons, probably not. Like obviously I think he got paid already now, but or did he get? Did Parsons get that deal yet?
I don't remember.
Well, it might have been a report that they were like coming close or something actually, but whoever it could be.
They have not.
They have not. Okay. Whoever it could be that pops up available, like you now have 2 firsts, and it makes it easier to maybe trade your second or trade a second and a fourth if you like could get in on something like that. But yeah, I think it opens up enough things for the Rams that you couldn't say no.
All right. Let's keep rolling to the Seattle Seahawks. This is another team that made a ton of picks. Gray Zabel in the first round, Nicky Manwari in the second round, Elijah Arroyo in the second round, Jalen Milroe in the third, and then they made 7 day 3 picks. So they come out of the draft with 11 total players, 4 top 100 picks. They had 4 top 100 players for me, 6 top 100 players for you. My best value for them was Jalen Milroe. I had him at 49. They took him at 92. And then my worst value, and this was the same as yours, was tight end Elijah Arroyo. I had him at 64. They took him at 50. My biggest draft regret is that they took Elijah Arroyo over Trey Harris, who's a wide receiver that I really liked. I think they would have gotten a lot more value out of Trey Harris over Elijah Arroyo. But overall, I gave him a B, or I gave him a B minus, but I'm changing it to a B. I like their draft. I'll give it a B.
Yeah, I love this draft. It's one of my favorites. Besides, there's one we're going to talk about next, and the Panthers. Besides that, this is probably my third favorite draft in the NFL. I really like what they did. Zabel, good value there, a little higher than I had him ranked, but it was a position of need, and they fell in love with him. Eman Worry, and it's one of those things where if they flipped Eman Worry and Zabel, I would love both picks for where they got them. So I had Eman Worry like 18, and they would have picked him 18. So that was a great pick there. Milroe, I love that shot at the end of the third round at a developmental guy like Milroe. And he doesn't have to start right away. I don't think Darnold's the guy who you can't take a guy like that to back him up. I loved a couple of the day 3 picks there with Riley Mills, with Damian Martinez, especially Martinez. I really like him. But yeah, I really liked everything about this draft besides taking Arroyo. And even if that's the case, Arroyo was my tight end 3. So I do like Arroyo relative to the other guys. I just think this wasn't a draft to take tight end high. You should have taken Trey, Landon, Princely, or Scorton over Arroyo, and it would have been an A++++.
All right. Then let's get to our final draft. It's the Arizona Cardinals. They took Walter Nolan in the first round, Will Johnson in the second round, Jordan Birch in the third, and then 4 guys on day 3. Overall, they had 3 top 100 picks. They got 2 top 100 players for me, 3 for you. My best value was Will Johnson. I had him at 6 overall, and I was the low guy on him among our draft panelists. They got him at 47. Now, obviously, there's some medical things that caused him to fall. So his medicals must have been bad for him to fall that far. We can't speak to that. But relative to play on the field, that's a great pick. Even if he's like, it's degenerative knee issues and he's not a second contract player, but he can give you a rookie contract of good play, that's a slam dunk pick. My worst value was Jordan Birch, who I did not have in my top 100. They got him at 78. My biggest regret for them is missing Princely by 1 spot. He went 1 spot before Jordan Birch. And then also that they took Jordan Birch over a guy like Wyatt Milam. I thought Milam would have been a great pick at 78 for them. They need to invest in their offensive line. So that's where I would have liked to have seen them go. But overall, I gave them an A. What about you?
I gave him an A+. This is my favorite draft in the NFL. I loved what Arizona did. And this is like, it kind of throws a wrench. I was totally going to predict like a 3-14 year for Arizona. Like I thought it was they were totally prime for Gannon, Kyler. You fire Gannon and you trade Kyler and you totally rebuild that whole organization. I don't know if this draft totally will prevent that from happening. And maybe the division not being all that good will help also. But I love every pick they made. Walter Nolan, I think that was their biggest problem, was not having anything at D tackle. He was the best. Him or Harmon, I think, would have been great picks there. You have the second round pick, Will Johnson. Obviously, I had him second overall. So that's like one of the biggest steals I've ever seen in the NFL draft. Obviously, injuries. We're not doctors. We have no idea. But on the football field, makes no sense that he fell past the top 15, let alone to pick 47. And then I like Birch. I like Birch more than some people. I have him 77. They took him 78. So 10 sacks last year. He's always kind of been a pressures guy, and he was able to kind of put it together with actually getting to the quarterback. So, and then they got two guys who weren't in my top 100, but two guys who were kind of frequent day 3 mock picks for me, and Cody Simon and Denzel Burke, both from Ohio State. You're going to take, a couple roles on day 3, not bad roles to take on, 5-star high school prospects who helped win a national championship, even if they were both pretty flawed as prospects.
All right. I do have to ask you, because on your biggest draft regret, you typed no regrets. I do have to ask if that was on purpose or not.
It's a We're the Millers reference.
Okay. I've seen like the tattoos.
Yeah.
I wondered if it was a reference or a typo, so I had to ask. But
no, it's a reference. I actually have a lot more of that. I think I went through. I had like 6 or 7 no regrets. It might have been some of the NFC also.
Okay.
And I went through and kind of made myself have some regrets and forced myself to take stands. So I had more of them until last night, but there's a couple guys I can't give any. Who was it? Arizona. I don't know what my regret is. I don't know. Maybe why Milam in the third? That would have been good. You're right.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for our NFC draft grades. We will be back next week. We'll do all the AFC draft grades before we get into some other stuff. So let us know. You agree or disagree with some of these grades? You can shout us out on Twitter. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts?
My final thought is people who hate draft grades. Like, I feel like it's the hot thing. It's the hot topic to be like, oh, they grade the draft the day after, and they don't even know if the players are going to be good yet. And it's like, then what's the point of any of this? What's the point of spending 2 months before the draft talking about the draft, talking about the players we liked, if we're not going to then after the draft come back and say this team got the players we like, or this team drafted the players I didn't like? What's the point? Like, it's like, and I know Scott Van Pelt, who's a guy I love, does this with Stanford Steve every year, where he goes, "Oh, the draft grades, Mel Kiper, what you're just grading based on your rankings." Yeah, what are we ranking based on? Like, if it's weird to take the stance just on draft grades. If you're gonna have this stance be like, you should be mad that anyone puts out pre-draft player rankings because you don't know how good the players are. What's the difference between doing pre-draft player rankings and then grading where those players got drafted? I don't know if I'm even conveying this final thought and this like annoyance with like it's just such like a trope, I think, to be like, oh, draft grades. Oh, you must think you're smarter than the GM. Like, what's the point of doing any of this if we're taking that attitude about that?
Yeah. I got into it with some Eagles fans on Twitter because I dared to be critical of all the trade backs the Eagles were making. And it's like, I mean, we're here to talk about football. Like,
yeah.
If you want to follow me when I'm talking positive things about the Eagles and then yell at me when I say anything critical, I guess that's your prerogative. And I guess that's also why I don't engage as much anymore. But we're just here to talk about players and teams and draft processes. And some of these opinions are going to be wrong, and that's fine. It's part of the fun of it all, is not knowing exactly how it's going to pan out. But I try to look at process, and there's just some processes you can see are inherently flawed. They still might work out. Absolutely. I think about that. I killed the Texans for trading a future first to go get Will Anderson after they took CJ Stroud. And that worked out because they made the playoffs the next year. And I still think that's not great process. And there's two teams this draft that use first to trade up for non-QBs. And maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. Don't love that process. And so there's lots of things to talk about. There's going to be guys that nobody heard of that are great out of this draft. There's going to be guys that were first round picks that are busts. It's a lot more for me talking about value at the position and the process to get there and how you met your needs and things like that.
Are you sure it was a good trade yet, the Will Anderson trade? Like, the Texans have so many needs. Like, they obviously had a huge receiver need. They went out and drafted 2 of them. They had huge O-line needs, which they drafted 1. They probably need 4. And you traded your best one in Tunsil. Allegedly there are some culture problems, but you have a ton of needs on that roster. Yeah, you got 2 good players in CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. Part of the problem there is that you gave up a first and a first. Like, you gave up 2 picks that would have went to other positions, and they might have given up more than that. I'd have to look at what the exact trade was, but I don't even know if you can like victory lap based on the Texans winning a terrible division 2 years in a row. Like, I think we might still be right, is what I'm saying. Hate that trade.
Maybe so. We'll see how it all goes. But if you're not a draft grades person, you're probably not listening an hour and 15 minutes into a draft grades podcast. But if you are, it's where we're coming from. And the good news for you is we have one more draft related piece of content, and then there will be no more draft talk for the next 3 months as we get into some other off-season topics. So if you are draft fatigued out, we are too. We're almost there. We're going to get into some NFL roster stuff the week after next, but next week, AFC draft grades. Hopefully you guys follow along for that as well. Give us a follow on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next time.